Hey listeners, this is your host Brian Almeida, just here to make a quick announcement before we get started. Beginning this week, I'm going to be doing a solo episode on Thursdays. These are going to be shorter episodes, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes, where I'll just be focusing on a subject from my own personal life or something I've learned from a previous episode, and just talking about the vulnerability of the situation and what I've learned from it and what you might be able to learn from it too. All right, guys, here we go with this week's episode, and thanks for listening. Take care and bye for now. Welcome to the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Almeida. Each week, we'll share the inspiring story of someone who has faced their share of vulnerability and been able to find success and fulfillment. We hope all our stories will help you find the strength within yourself to live the life you want and find success of your own. Leo Christopher said, "Vulnerability is the essence of connection, and connection is the essence of existence." This is episode 23 of the Vulnerable Podcast with Shauna Arnott. Her childhood was pretty normal, and it wouldn't be until university when she'd face her first real challenges. Deciding to attend school 5 hours away from her hometown was difficult enough, but becoming a single mom at the same time brought it to a whole new level. Not only did she need to keep her grades up, she also held down a job to make ends meet. If you ask her, the only thing that made it easier was her community, mainly the one she found at her church. She specifically remembers a time when she was deathly ill and a member of her community randomly showed up at her door to provide a helping hand. These experiences would definitely provide the strength she needed to take a leap into entrepreneurship later on in life. It wouldn't be an easy journey by any means, as her first major event put her in some serious debt, leaving her pretty worn and torn after not being sure if she was going to make it back and if she was chasing the right thing. Now, Hasten Hustle, her major annual event, is becoming a huge success, attracting speakers like Gary Vaynerchuk and this year, Sir Richard Branson. She's a great example of how perseverance and not being afraid to face the wilderness can pay off. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get vulnerable with Shauna Arnott. Hey, Shauna, thank you for coming on the Vulnerable Podcast. I'm excited to have you on. It sort of happened very quickly. You sent me a quick message, I sent you one back, and here we are. So I'm glad to have you on. I know a bit about your story and sort of I would say, the struggles you've had with Hasten Hustle, but I'm sure that's not the only story you can share with us today. But yeah, thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to be here and I'm excited for your podcast.
Thank you.
Great.
So the first question I ask every guest is, what is your definition of vulnerability?
Oh boy, started off easy, eh? I think for me, it's vulnerability really just means being open about the struggles that you have, as well as the things that you can celebrate, and just not trying to hide from the challenges and being willing to share all that, so that you can help others avoid those errors or avoid those challenges or work through them or give people um, some inspiration to get through that sort of thing. I think, so I think it's really just about being open about the challenges, the pitfalls, as well as the celebration.
No, awesome. And it's funny because that pretty much defines my podcast. So good
Okay.
definition.
Well, here we go. Maybe I should be your co-host.
Yeah, there you go. There's been a few people where I'm like, maybe you should be doing this. So it's not the first time.
Mhm.
So what would you say would be your earliest memory of facing some sort of vulnerability or struggle in your life?
Oh boy. Um, Probably, you know, I had a fairly, it's funny. I had a pretty simple, easy childhood. Like I didn't have any like horrible things happen to me or anything like that. But I think, I started to face the challenges mostly post high school when I went away to university. I had my son, and I had to overcome the challenges of being a single parent to a baby when I was in university, living 5 hours north of my hometown, and just under, kind of having to um, look away from any um, judgment that I got, even though I was an older student. It wasn't like I was a teenage parent or anything, but I still got, probably some judgment and some of those things. And then just the challenge of actually doing it, getting up at 5 a.m. every day to make sure, I was getting Noah fed and ready and off to school, and having to drop him off in the minus 40 at sometimes, and and getting to class on time, and keeping my marks up, and trying to make some friends, and then also having to work a job. I worked a job as well while I was in university, and like all those things. um, and just studying and staying up all night sometimes, and having to complete, you know, um, these crazy reports for science classes and different things, and and then still trying to just have fun and enjoy being a parent, and enjoy, being a human, and having just friends and fun and stuff like that too. You kind of sometimes lose that when you're in those crazy busy times. So I'd say that was probably the first time in my life where I was challenged outside of my, what I felt I was capable of, and then I had to then, dig down and find strength, and find energy, and find, the resources to overcome that and to work through it. And I think that was probably the first time. I was 22, 23. So.
Well, I mean, I think that's unfortunate. It's fortunate in some ways, but in other ways, I'm sure it was still difficult to deal with. I mean, the reason I say fortunate in some ways is, I guess, at that age, you had gone through a few things in life and probably had some skills that helped you, get through that situation. And speaking of, like, what would you say specifically helped you overcome, those struggles at that time? I know you talked about finding the strength and finding the energy, but was there anything that you did specifically to help you sort of get through that time, or maybe people that helped you, whatever it might have been?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was 100% reaching out. I attend church every week, and I found one when I went up to Sudbury. That's where I went to university, and it was immediate when I went there. I had people offering to drive me places, and one woman who I don't even know, she just worked in the nursery, came up to me afterwards and just said to me, she's like, "If you ever need anyone to drive you anywhere, it could be the middle of the night, just give me a call." Or, because I didn't even have a car. And I ended up finding this family who, the daughter and I ended up having several classes together at school, so that worked out well. And then they attended that church, and then they had me over every Sunday for lunch, and they, became like a second family up in that area, and helped me so much. And I think it was that. It was like reaching out and getting connected to people that were supportive and loving, and just willing to just come alongside me. And that was 100% how I got through that. Because let me tell you, I remember there was a time when Noah was so sick, and I was so sick. We were both so sick together. And then, no, I was so sick. He was not that sick. He had been sick, and then he got better, and then I got so sick. And I just remember I was lying on the couch in my living room, and I couldn't even hardly move. And he was like 1.5, and he was kind of toddling around. And he just sort of toddled into the kitchen, and I could hear him like making noise. And I went in there like a minute or two later, and he'd opened the like cupboard and dumped out rice and Cheerios all over the kitchen floor. And I was like deathly ill. Okay. So I was like, I cannot. And it was cold outside. It was the winter. And I just remember looking at him and going, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing. And I couldn't even bring myself to clean it up. I was just so sick. And then my friend, this girl who I met at church, she came over like 10 minutes later. It was just coincidence. She just stopped by because she knew I wasn't well. And she just was like, here, how about I take Noah out? And she took him out to McDonald's, to the playland, and to have like lunch or something, and just like let me sleep. And she cleaned up the kitchen for me. And like, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is what it's meant, and that's the power of having, really good people in your life who just once in a while are there when you really need them. And I think when you're going through the challenges of life, having a good support network is 100% the key to success in getting through that. Like I could never do what I do and go through the challenges that I've gone through on my own without family, friends, great colleagues and peers. it's all essential.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Some of what I'm starting to speak about as I'm figuring things out over the past, 10 to 12 months. I mean, whether you noticed or not, or whether anybody noticed, I was very heavily on social media, and then I just sort of disappeared. And as I'm making sort of my return now, it's because I needed to really figure out sort of what I wanted to talk about. But one of the things that I talk about is finding your circle, which
Mhm.
is what you're talking about there. And I couldn't agree more. If you don't have the right support, it makes it that much harder. I mean, last year I met a lot of people in a short period of time and thought I had made many friends. And what I found out over the long term is that, there's a lot of those people are acquaintances, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's only a core group of them that are really like the true friends, the people that reached out, were like, what's going on, what's happening, is something wrong, like,
Yeah.
and have helped me sort of make this comeback. So I couldn't agree with you more in terms of that.
Mhm.
What I find interesting though is, as you're telling that story, I could not imagine. I don't know if it's just that part of Ontario or something, but I could not imagine doing that like where I live now, like Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto area. I could not imagine meeting complete strangers and being like, "Yeah, that's fine. You can help me with my kid." I couldn't
Well,
imagine
I don't even think I ever called that woman, to be honest with you, but
that.
she did just come and off. Like we ended up chatting after church, and she just sort of, I was just telling her about myself and how we just moved up, and all this, that, and the other. And she was like, "Well, if you ever need anything," like she was genuine. Like I know that I could have. She gave me her number, and I saw her every week, and she always asked me how I was, and but yeah, it was an incredible community. And then even just back home here, like I have the same situation within my community, and I love it. Like I love having those people who are just willing to kind of stick their neck out for you a little bit. But yeah, I know it's actually kind of funny when you think about it.
Would you say that
Whatever you want. Yeah, I bet you.
do you think it has something to do with that relationship to church and faith, possibly, or
I
just
think so.
a
I
yeah.
think so. I've always relied heavily on it, and definitely just found the community and the welcoming nature of people. I mean, certainly there are people within Christian faith that are not good people, but um mostly you meet just such lovely folks, and people willing to just help you whatever you can. Like I would have no hesitation in calling up certain people from my church and saying, "Hey, can you come and look after Noah for the afternoon if I needed it?" Or obviously
Yeah,
not anymore, he's 17.
yeah, yeah.
But like it's always that's always. And I even look at my mom. I mean, like my mom goes around and she like makes meals for women who just had babies, or and she goes and does all this stuff for people, and it's all like really practical support stuff. But I'm like, that is the kind of community stuff. And I mean, I'm sure it's at other types of faith-based organizations. I don't think it's just specific to Christian faith, but I think it's just nice if you can find a community of people that are willing to just support you and feed into your life and just provide you with practical support, and then also come alongside you in a loving way that they can just be an ear to listen, shoulder to cry on if you need
Yeah.
it, and then someone to celebrate with you.
No, awesome.
So I think all those things are essential, and I found it within my faith. But yeah, and that's always meant a lot to me.
No, I just a different perspective and just trying to understand it. I mean, myself, I grew up, I was baptized and all that, but didn't really, you know, I didn't go to church or anything like that. My wife went to Catholic school, so we grew up very differently, and so I just sort of, and my wife's Filipino, and the Filipino culture is very, they're very religious people, and so it wanted to get a perspective because myself, I haven't practiced that much, and so just
Mhm.
wanted to get your perspective on it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
aside from, you said, it was the people and building community that helped you overcome the situation, but what new strength did you discover in yourself going through all this? Like what did you find out from going through these things?
I think that I found that I could do whatever I wanted to do if I put my mind to it. Like I really did see that that was an option. Like it was like, oh, I don't have to have all these things in place, and my life doesn't have to be perfect and all this stuff in order for me to achieve a goal I want. If I want to do something, I can just go do it. And sometimes there's just a few more obstacles in the way, but that's just part of the process. And so I think I learned a lot about that. And then also just the strength to keep going. Like a lot of people will hit up against a wall and think, oh, I just can't do this anymore, or whatever, and then not keep going. Or they hit up against a wall, they stop, and they sort of intend to go back or intend to fix it, and then they don't again. And I think that, if you can get hit, you can get knocked down and knocked off the mountain a little bit, but if you start climbing again, you'll get to the top. But if you don't, you never will. So I mean, I ended up doing my degree in chunks. So like I did the first couple of years, and then I took another year off, and then I ended up getting married, and then I went back for a year. I moved back to Sudbury on my own with Noah. Sorry, me and Noah. He was in grade 1, I think, at the time, or 2, and my husband stayed here. And then I came back, and then I had one more year, and I went back on my own and did it. So like it took me a while, but like, and I had some things that stopped me at times, but I still always went back. And so I sort of learned that about myself, that I won't let a challenge that stops me stop me forever, because it can stop you for a minute or a year or a month, but it doesn't have to stop you forever.
Sounds like perseverance. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah,
you
there you
use
go.
that word, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it sounds like perseverance, which I, again, couldn't agree more. I've faced that, myself, and I think a lot of us do, just because, it, I feel like nowadays more than ever, it's easier to get deterred, only because we see the successes, and people that can't see me, I put air quotes, because we see what people put out there, and we may think that everybody's successful and everybody's figured it out, but then it's not necessarily true. So I feel like you have to have that perseverance. You have to have sort of that self-awareness too, to keep yourself going, because it's not especially, I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but in entrepreneurship especially, like, it's a lonely game. Like, yeah, you have support, you have teams around you, but at the end of the day, it's up to you and how much you're willing to persevere to make yourself successful. So
Well, that's
um
the truth right
yeah.
there.
Well, it's a good thing that you were able to find that strength and continue to persevere, because I'm sure it's helped you. You know, the next question, it's one that I'm trying to reformulate, because what I used to ask people was, how many times would you say you faced real struggle and vulnerability in your life? And then people would look at me like, well, I don't know, like 10, like. And then I had one good gentleman who actually sort of challenged me with the question, saying, compared to who? So what I'm trying to get at now is I want to sort of understand, like, the vulnerabilities and struggles that you faced. What kind of emotional toll have they taken on you? Would you say that it's really affected your life, or not so much? I mean, you sort of touched on that at the beginning, saying that growing up, you had a pretty easy childhood. But would you say any of the other struggles and vulnerabilities, whether it was being the single parent and trying to go to school, whether it's in becoming an entrepreneur, what sort of emotional toll would you say that they've taken on you?
Um, well, right now I've gone through, like, the past 3 years have been, really, really challenging, because I started my business, and it's been, really hard. But now I'm kind of sort of rounding the bend. And so right now I feel like I'm at the end of a bit of a wilderness, so shall we call it. And so I feel like a bit worn and torn. I feel emotionally, browbeaten and tired. Like I'm like, I just need a bit of a reprieve at the moment. So but I mean, I tend to always be very optimistic and happy. Like those are kind of my go-to emotional states, and I can sort of remain in those things. But I would say that, sometimes I was describing this to someone actually yesterday. You know how you have an elastic, and if you pull it really tight and held it really tight for a long time, it loses its elasticity and it becomes weird. Like it doesn't work anymore. I kind of feel like I've pushed myself so hard that I've been in that tension. I've held that tension for too long, and so now I'm like a little like I need to kind of go back and focus a little bit more on my own personal self care. And I think that I'm starting to do that now. And so I would say that that's where I get challenged, and that's where I've, you know, kind of arrived at the moment, being fully vulnerable and honest with you. And so things happen where you lose your ability to do certain things when you're in that state, right? So you lose some ability. Like for me, I get overwhelmed, and I kind of reduce my communication to a point where I'm like just kind of just doing the bare minimum, or I just shut down a little bit, or and I have to like actually sit and say to myself, no, these are what this is what you have to do today. And and I force myself through it, and it's hard. And then like yesterday, for instance, actually, just I was so tired, and I think just the emotional stress of a bunch of stuff that's happened, good stuff too, can really put you in that state too. So I've actually had some really great things happening lately, but tons of work and tons of stress in terms of like getting things done. So yesterday I was like so tired. At like 3:30 in the afternoon, I went. I decided to take a nap, and I never do that ever. I just was like so tired, and I lied down. And I did not wake up till like 9 o'clock at night. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what just happened here? And then I was like, oh, annoyed, because I'm like, oh no, I'll never sleep tonight, and on and on. But I did. I like stayed up for like an hour and a half, and then I went back to sleep and slept all night long. And so like it's those times where you're like, oh, I really needed it. Now I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling well either, so it kind of was a little bit of a part of it. But I was like, holy smokes, like this is what happens when you overdo it. And I think that I tend to do that. So I don't know. Is that the answer? So,
No, no, that makes sense. I mean, I've seen a lot of people in my own life that have gone through burnout without even realizing it, and then when it hits you, it's like, oh my God, like you're saying, like you don't feel it necessarily in the moment, but then it's when it finally hits you, you're like, okay, yeah, you know what, I needed this time, whether it's taking a nap or whether it's that you need just time for yourself or whatever it might be.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
completely makes sense. So would you be able to share any other stories that you have of other struggles and vulnerabilities that you faced? I mean, you just said that a lot of what's happened over the past few years. What is it that's happened over the past few years that's caused sort of those feelings at times and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, so when I started Haste and Hustle, I started it, in a very naive and idealistic way. And I thought to myself, I'm an event planner. I can plan a large event, and everyone will come, and I'll just get the right people, and it'll plan itself. What a joke that is. Anyway, but and so I did, and I booked Gary V, and I just figured, well, if Gary V's coming, everyone will want to come, and I'm going to sell tickets, and I'm going to start to do something really cool that I design. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. Like I hired Gary and Casey Neistat and Manjeet Minhas and a number of other really great speakers, and I just assumed that that was the answer to this event. And it definitely was not. And I really learned. And so that first year, I really learned the hardest lesson of my career, which was, the effort that you have to put into sales and the strategy and all that initially is key. And so I ended up losing a ton of money that year on that event, and was pretty much really ready and willing to just kind of pack it in and think, man, this is not going to work. But back to the perseverance. It was actually really nice because Gary offered to come and do a second event with me pro bono as a way to help me earn that money back. And he did. And I learned a lot of lessons and tried to apply them. And the second year I got that much better. Not perfect yet, but still that much better. And we earned a lot of money, and I was able to like recoup a lot of the costs. Not all of them. We're still actually finishing paying off those debts. And it was for me so hard because I saw the impact on businesses that had worked with me, and different things, that I was like, oh, this is the worst feeling ever. You don't want to ever have that impact on someone's business. And so that was, that was really the hardest part of the past few years. And then in the second year, when we were doing that free, that event that Gary offered to do free, I just didn't have enough staff and I couldn't afford to pay people, and so I was doing it all on my own. And so there was a lot of balls dropped there too, just from lack of support. But at the same time, that the both events ended up going really well. Like, were you at that second event?
I was at the second one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I won the tickets from your
Oh,
Facebook
that's right. That's right.
competition. Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, it was, they're great events. And so I just feel like sometimes I'm not risk averse enough. I take on, but like, I don't know, I get a little bit caught up in the hype sometimes, and so I have to kind of back away. But I think that that's just, because when you're in business, you realize the impact that what you do, it has impact on everybody. For me, it's the suppliers I work with, and the stakeholders in my business, and the people who come to the events, and and even my family and my friends, like they see all. So I think that when I look back, I think I wish that I had the ability to recognize that a little earlier on, and to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. But at the same time, my business also grew significantly through those experiences and through those things that I learned. And the perseverance has allowed me to stick through those hard times. And now I'm really starting to see the fruits of that labor. And so really at the end of on the other side of the wilderness is always the the goodness, so it's just sticking it through, I guess.
No,
Persevere.
for sure. I mean, and the one thing I sort of grasped at the end there, and it's a saying that I've heard recently, a quote that I've probably mentioned a few times, either on this podcast or outside of this, is that there's no such thing as failing, only learning.
Yeah.
And that's something that I pull from what you just said, is that, you may feel like you failed, but realistically, if you step back for a second, it's more so that you learned something. Because if you failed completely, the haste and hustle wouldn't exist anymore, right?
Mhm.
But instead you were able to take whatever happened and learn from it so that you can improve the next time. And I mean, I would, like we just said, I was at that second event, and I wouldn't have even known, to be completely honest with you, that there was things that didn't go right, because it seemed to go pretty good to me.
Yeah, yeah.
I know the only thing that I think got a little out of control was when you had Gary signing books in the
Oh,
VIP
yeah.
lunchroom. Yeah, people just went kind of bonkers. But like, I
Oh,
mean, I think, you bring somebody like Gary to an event and you give people an opportunity to meet them, you're going to have that sort of, little bit of craziness going on,
it's
just
funny
because people.
because, in the first year, Gary got a bunch of attention, but Casey is the guy who got all the attention.
Hmm.
Like, I had people like stalking the building and
Oh
like
God.
trying to find entryways, and we had to set up a very secure area. And I hadn't anticipated that because, I mean, I knew he was famous, but I guess I underestimated how famous he was.
Yeah.
And to me, Gary was the bigger guy. It turned out that Casey was the bigger guy, and like people were jumping over the stanchions just to touch him. And I was like, guys, like, what is wrong with you? This is a meeting. Like, leave the guy alone. Like, I felt bad for not recognizing that for him. But it was just part of the learning, as you
Yeah.
said. But yeah, I know that. But that book signing at Generation Now was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Just so many people try and sneak in, and if they do, they get in, and I don't know.
Yeah. Huh.
We buttoned that down. Let me tell you.
Well, you can only do it so much, and like I said, it wasn't that like nuts, but that's the only thing I noticed that entire day that didn't seem to maybe go as planned. But at the end of the day, most of us, I know I got my signing, and I think everybody got their, whatever it was, 10 seconds or 15 seconds to meet him and shake his
Yeah.
hand. And I hope to meet him again one day, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But so all these things that you've gone through, the schooling, the struggles with haste and hustle, how would you say all of them have helped you get to where you're at now with your company? I know that you've got Richard Branson coming next year, which, I mean, must have been unbelievable to book somebody like that. So how would you say everything that you've sort of gone through has helped you get to where you're at right now?
Um, I think it all comes back down to the just knowing that you can do whatever you want, and you just got to you can make happen whatever you want to make happen. It really, for me, I mean, I'm just solopreneur living in a small town, and yet here I've managed to do all these, book these significant speakers, and no one would even know walking. Like, I sometimes look out my window as people are walking by and think, they have no idea what we're cooking up in this house. And it's kind of funny, and because I end up working with a lot of celebrities, and so I think, I learned that I can just do whatever I want. Like, going away to university was, with Noah and everything, I never thought I could do that. But then I just went and did it, and it worked. And then, when I wanted to go back to school and study event management, I just did it, and it worked. Like, at the end of the day, it's just, you have to be willing to give something up. Creature comforts is usually the thing you're going to give up, and so I did. I didn't. I'm not really that worried about creature comforts. So, if you're willing to give something up, you can achieve whatever you want, I think. And then again, back to the perseverance, just knowing that giving up is really the only thing that turns a challenge into a failure. And
No,
yeah, so.
sort of a sidebar, but something from that. You said, you sort of, you've met lots of celebrities, or you meet lots, you interact with them. And the one thing that sort of has come to me recently in reading, I read a lot more books recently, and just I've listened to a lot more podcasts as well. And the one thing that I think is really interesting, as I've sort of learned about people that you see as celebrities, is that, you know, they're just people. Like
Mhm.
their story is probably the same as yours or mine or anybody else's, in terms of like how they came up. I'm sure there's a few celebrities that, generationally they came up through family and stuff like that, but for the most part, these people that we see as celebrities had the struggles, had the issues. I mean, I remember listening to an interview with Lewis Howes, and it's actually what really pushed me to get started on doing my podcast, because he talked about, being in his early 20s, living on his sister's sofa and all these sort of things. And I was just like, oh my God, I looked at this guy on social and thought, this guy's, like popular, and he's this and he's that. And there's, he's never had anything wrong in his life. And then you hear about his story and you're like, oh, wow. Like, I, lost my job a couple of years ago. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just sort of, again, like a sidebar, I don't know if you found the same thing in meeting these people,
Oh, for
or,
sure. I mean, I don't think I was ever really a starstruck person. Although I have to say, I admire Gary so much that when I do see him in the times that I've gone to interview him and stuff like that, I do feel like tongue tied, which is kind of funny. That's like the extent of my starstruckness. And I get a little like just quiet. Whereas, with most people I'm very like chatty, and I can certainly have great conversation. But yeah, I never really get that. Like, I'm not demonstratively excited. I am internally. I'm like, it is exciting to meet famous people and whatnot. But I certainly don't look at them and think, oh, you're so much better than me, or anything like that. Like, we're all just. But I don't think I'm better than them either. Like, I just think that we all have a story. We're all humans. We all get up and put our pants on one leg at a time.
yeah,
Like, I just don't see, for me, when I look around and I think, okay, well, these people have more money in their bank account and have more people that know who they are. That's what fame is, right? Typically.
yeah.
And so, and sometimes it's just more people who know who you are. So I just think, I don't know, those aren't like qualities that I think are so exciting. So I don't know, maybe I'm just too boring, I guess.
No, no, but I think
I
it's,
don't worry. I just doesn't faze me.
yeah, no, and I think that's a great thing to have. And I, like I said, I think it's just, for me, what I've realized over the last little while is like what you're saying, is that it's, sure, they might have more followers or whatever, and they might have more money, but at the end of the day, they're still just a person. They're still
Mhm.
just a human being, and that's the realization I've come to as well. Not that I've met a bunch of famous people or celebrities at this point, but it's just like I said, through listening to their stories or reading their stories, you begin to realize, like you said, even before as well, you can do anything you want. And when I look at these people's stories, that's pretty much what it was, is that they had this decision at some point in their life that they're going to do what they want to do, and then they're going to make it work. And it's
Mhm.
what drives me. And so, hearing your story, hearing other people's stories who have been on here, reading people's stories, whatever it is really sort of motivating me now, because I'm realizing, like, the only thing that's really holding me back is me.
Yeah.
it's that negative self-talk or those things that we tell ourselves that's holding us back, and not really any. We can blame it on a hundred other things, but at the end of the day, we're the only ones that are in control. And so if we just have that, perseverance and that, sort of mindset of I can do what I want to do, I think we can as well.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like I sit around and I have self-doubt and negative talk spin through my head a lot. And it's not like I think that I can do whatever I want to do just because I'm so baller. I just think I think anyone can. Like I honestly do believe that anyone can do whatever the heck they want to do. It's just people aren't willing to make the sacrifices to do the things they want to do, and they're too worried about what people will think, and then they also buy into their own negative self-talk. Oh, I can't do this, or it's too hard, or something, or they'll start to do it and then like a little bump in the road will happen and they'll be like, okay, this is not working, I'm not gonna do it anymore. That's not it. I mean, it's still really hard, and it's still something that you have to be cognizant of, I think, but I also do 100% believe it.
Well, like
So
I said, I think it's an important mindset to have, and I think more of us need to sort of adapt it. And it's not that all of us need to become entrepreneurs or millionaires or whatever, but
no.
it's just that ability to know that if there's something you want, you have to go out and get it, whether it's a different career, job, whatever it might be. Like you just have to have the enough drive, I guess it is, to want it. And like you said, make sacrifices. And I've seen both of those in my life over the last few years, and I'm sure it won't be the last time, without a
Yeah.
doubt. So.
Yeah.
So would you say at this point in your life that you found success and fulfillment, or that you're still on your journey towards it?
um I yeah, I feel fulfilled, and I feel successful, although I still have goals that I haven't reached yet, but I still very feel very successful in knowing that I'm doing what I really like, knowing that I can get up and walk upstairs to my office and sit here and not have to fight traffic and all the things that I don't like to have to do. And I have great friends and family, and all those things to me are the most important things. So yeah, I feel successful, I feel fulfilled, I'm very happy, and I have a lot to be grateful for. So much, I can't even list it all in one breath. you know but but it doesn't change the fact that I still have goals that I'd like to see come to fruition, and things that I'd like to improve upon and all that stuff, but it's all part of the journey.
No, definitely. But I like your answer there, because I think a lot of people, uh, unfortunately, in I guess again today's society, when we look at success, we think it's all about money and certain accolades and stuff like that. And for you to sort of tie your success and fulfillment to the fact that you feel happy, and that
Mhm.
fact that you're in a place in your life where you don't, like you said, you don't have to travel hours for work or whatever. I think that it's important that you've defined it, A, and then B, that it's not sort of the societal definition, and that you feel good about where you're at. Because again, I get that thing of comparison is one of the things that I think stops a lot of us. And it's important that we sort of define things for ourselves. And I was the same way last year when I was trying to start my own business. I was like, I got it to be successful, I've got to be making $1 million and this and that, and have this and have that. And then I realized that really wasn't success for me.
Mhm.
But we all go through it, we all go through these times, and that's how I think we come to these sort of definitions at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
but glad to hear it. And so I'm down to the last couple questions. This last one is one that basically I want to, everybody that listens, I want to give them the opportunity to walk away from your episode or any of the episodes and sort of have some key takeaways, some tips that they can use to implement in their own life to overcome their own struggles, the own vulnerabilities that they have. So if you could give 3 key takeaways from your journey, that have helped you sort of progress, that somebody else could use, what would those 3 takeaways be?
um I think 3 takeaways to be successful are being completely honest with yourself and your core team about where you're at, how you feel, and and being able to admit when you're wrong and when you've made a mistake, and then turn around and seek advice and support and alternatives for move forward. um that's one, which is sort of like a bunch, but to be completely appreciative and grateful for the people who do support you. It's an issue that that's a piece that I have not always been that great at. In my heart, I feel it, but I haven't always been great at communicating it, and I've started to, and I, in the past year, been much more so. But I think that's huge because there's so many people out there willing to support and love and guide you, and all you need to some is to truly appreciate that, because it's there's so much value in that. And also, sort of back to what we were talking about, knowing that you can do whatever you want, you know, as long as it's legal and good for the earth and world and humanity, I think go for it. And just stick it through. Like, just keep going. You will succeed if you are, I mean, you have to still have openness and talent and and certain things to get through it, but I would say perseverance is a huge indicator of success. You can have that.
No, definitely. Number two there, and the appreciation and gratitude point is something I tell everybody. In terms of, like, if you have any problem in your life, gratitude will fix it, and that's just my opinion. I
Yeah.
mean, I could be wrong, but I really believe it because I've seen it work for myself and just in my own life and the improvements I've had in my own life. I even just said to my boss at my factory job the other day that, if we showed a little more appreciation to people, it would fix a lot of the problems. I said, well, humans, I don't think we're all that complex. I think if we communicate well enough and we show enough appreciation and gratitude for each other, it tends to do good things for building teams, relationships, whatever it is. I mean, it's helped my marriage, through better communication and gratitude, and just even family relationships and everything. So I
Mhm.
think that's, number two there is one that I definitely want to preach a little bit more about, just because I
Yeah.
definitely believe in the whole gratitude and appreciation thing.
Yeah, it's been a game changer for me.
No, definitely. So the last thing isn't so much a question, but more an opportunity for all my guests to sort of promote anything that they've got going on, put the word out there for themselves, whether it's their website, social, or free, in your case, an event. So the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Oh, well, that's nice. So I'd love to see all of you at Haste and Hustle. It's an event to serve and support emerging entrepreneurs, and it's happening on April 1st, 2020 in Toronto at Meridian Hall, which was formerly the Sony Center, and you can get your tickets on hasteandhustle.com.
Awesome. And then where would the best places to be to follow you? I know I met you, I think, through LinkedIn, but I don't know if that's the one you prefer.
Yeah, for LinkedIn, you can find me at Shauna Arnott. I'm also on Instagram, Shauna Claire One, or just at Haste and Hustle. And Haste and Hustle is sort of our tag for, or our name for Twitter and Facebook group and all that stuff. You can find us everywhere.
Awesome.
We're going to be
Awesome.
on TikTok soon, so who knows?
Oh, okay. Well, everybody's been talking about that. I haven't looked into it yet, but I'm assuming that I'm going to need to at some point. But yeah, I'll make sure to tag as much as I can in the show notes in terms of everything that's going on. This will be out well before April 1st, so
Awesome.
people will be able to hopefully listen in, and if they're interested in go, I'm hoping to go as well.
Good.
Just trying to get everything figured out. Last year, spent a lot of money trying to start my business, and
Oh,
it
I know.
didn't work out. So I, just trying to get everything back in order this year. But I definitely would love to join because it was a great event the last time. Met some new people, saw some old friends, and just had an overall great day and came out of it with a lot of new knowledge. And so yeah, so I hopefully will make it. But just want to finish off by thanking you for coming on. Thank you for sharing so openly. Again, the whole point of this podcast, the title of it is vulnerable, with the word able capitalized, because I want to get people to realize that no matter what struggles and vulnerabilities you face, you're still able to get through it and get to where you want to go. And I think your story definitely presented that in a pretty clear way. So again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing so openly, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again soon.
Thank you. It's been a real honor to be on here. So thanks so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Vulnerable Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps get the word out and means more than you know. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at vulnerable.podcast or on Facebook and LinkedIn by searching Vulnerable Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at the B.E. Almeida. That's the BEALMEIDA, or by searching my name on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you know anyone with a great story of going from struggle to success, please let me know, as I would love to interview them for the show. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and see you next week.